Hello and welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. Hello everybody and welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. It is Hump Day. Wednesday, that is, and it's a fantastic day to be Wednesday, Hump Day. And I say that because I've got some unbelievable news to tell you. There's so much news that has come in the last sort of 20 minutes before this show started that I must express it. You all need to know about it. It involves you all, in fact, so it's very important. And a lot of you that are regular listeners will know this. So hello to you all in the chat already. Halo says, boom. And Linda's in the house, Lyth is in the house, Sarah's in the house. Hello to you all. Fantastic. I appreciate you tuning in and turning up and spending your time with us. So let's get the first bit of news in. I will be sending out invites for the WCCS Halloween show writing prompt story in email soon. So if you are interested in being part of that story, as I mentioned before, read out by Julie Kesma and myself, please email the show at thewritingcommunitychatshow@gmail.com. or message me on Twitter, whether it's my account or the show's account. That is going to be fantastic. And also, there's only 10 people. There are only 10 people that have bought tickets for the WCCS book club, which starts next month. One of those 10 people will win the ticket, which will be a featured author for the entire month. And we will buy and review that book, and we will prompt the readers to do the same. It's a massive opportunity, and you can find that on our website, which, by the way, people have messaged about the website on mobile. It's not really designed for mobile just now. Please have a look at it on desktop. It looks fantastic on desktop. And so this is the page where we'll display the author. We'll find a bit about them, talk about their book and what the book means. And there's some review sections in there. It's a real featured page for that author. So definitely worth checking out and definitely worth entering. So please find that on the website. Just go to the writingcommunitychatshow.com and to the book club tab at the top, and you'll find out the information there. So let's get through some more news very quickly. I have signed up to something I've been wanting to do for a couple of years, which is a big walk. It doesn't sound much to you guys perhaps yet, but it's in fact 100 kilometers walk through France and Belgium. And it's retracing the steps of World War I soldiers in the Western Front, and it's called the Frontline Walk, which is in October next year. It requires a bit of fundraising, which is for a fantastic charity to do with supporting veterans, present, serving members and past. And it's also a great opportunity, which I've put out to the community. I've created a team within that charity event, so that perhaps if you are interested in doing that alongside me, which I will be vlogging for the YouTube channel, you are very welcome to join that. And you can see that on my pinned tweet, the information for that. So if you're interested or want to donate, please do so. And you can find that on my pinned tweet. Moving on, finally, before we get our guest on for tonight, which is going to be fantastic, there's one more bit of news, and that is the WCCS is teamed up with queerindie.com, and we will be at the Brooklyn Virtual Book Festival on the 1st of October, perhaps interviewing a lot of indie authors, showcasing what they've got to give, and probably having a bit of fun, and of course getting up to some mischief, as we always do on the show. So you can see that right here on this channel on the 1st of October with queerindie.com and all of the amazing people that are involved in that. Halo Scott, one of the founders of that, and there's going to be a lot more people there as well. Hello to Anya as well. Hello, thank you guys. So now I've got all of that news out the way, and there is a lot of it. So please, if you need to recap, I will tweet a lot of that. Indeed, we will get in trouble. Hopefully not too much. And Anya says, so excited for the event. I am indeed. So tonight's guest, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot to talk about with this guest. There's certain types of writing that goes on here. There's charity involved with this person as well. So there's going to be a lot that we can relate to and enjoy. So let's get that person on. She is the author and a travel writer, as I mentioned, from London. As we just mentioned before the show, she doesn't live in London right now, so that's a bit of an outdated information. Her novel, Take It Back, was named one of the best thrillers of the year by the Guardian and Telegraph, and was selected for an industry first audio serialisation by HarperCollins and The Pigeonhole, and has written for the New York Times, The Guardian, The Telegraph, BBC, and The Times. And is the founder of Asian Booklist, a non-profit that advocates for diversity in publishing, which is fantastic. Also a keen travel writer and blogger. She's also the founder of Atlas and Boots, which I've been looking at, and it's a fantastic website. And her latest book, Next of Kin, is being called a gripping courtroom drama, perfect for fans of 50/50 and My Sister's Keeper, which was released at the 2nd of September, so the start of this month, and it's a fantastic review so far. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kia Abdullah. Hello and welcome.
Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for having me. Happy Hump Day.
Indeed, Hump Day. I nearly got carried away with that. But first of all, thank you so much for joining me. It's an absolute pleasure that you're here. How are you doing?
I'm all right. I'm excited. You know, after 18 months, any human contact that I can get, I'm desperate for. So I'm very pleased that you invited me on here.
Yeah, it's been a long haul for all of us, hasn't it? And it seems like we're coming out of the back of it, but in the UK, I'm not entirely sure that's the case at the moment, but fingers crossed. There's lots to get involved with. And as we mentioned, you as a travel writer, I'm guessing is someone that loves to get out in the fresh air and explore. How's that been for you during lockdown?
Yeah, it's been really, really difficult. The last time I was away was January 2020. And so I'm coming up to almost 2 full years at home. And so it's been kind of crazy. I'm really looking forward to getting back on the road as soon as things calm down a little bit.
Absolutely. It is definitely one of those things that we took for granted. But I also remember back to the start of lockdown when people were going a bit weird, saying like, no cars were on the road, and when you actually got out to go for a walk, you could smell the earth a lot more, and you could smell the trees and the grass. There were a lot more insects out. You know, it was a real strange twist on the fact that all the cars were off the road and pollution, things were clearer. I'm guessing that's gone back to the way it was now, but it was a real eye-opener to how quickly the earth could kind of come back to the way it was.
Yeah, and you were hearing stories about, little villages in Pakistan, for example, which could see mountains that they hadn't seen for about 30 years. And so it was really an incredible time, but I'm sure we're all going to get back to our polluting ways sooner.
Yeah, unfortunately. Definitely. So, of course, as I mentioned, you weren't quite from, you are from London, but you've moved, as you said before, just outside Yorkshire. Is that correct?
Yes, so I was born and raised in London and then moved to Richmond, which is a small town on the edge of the Yorkshire Dales National Park 3 years ago. And so lockdown has been, it's been interesting because I've had access to the outdoors, whereas in London, I had a tiny little balcony. And so in that sense, it's been really great. But on the other hand, I've been quite far from friends and family. And so while my sisters were able to kind of go and hover by my mum's front door, and say hello, I hadn't seen her for a very long time. And so it was kind of, one of two halves. But as you said, I think we're on the home straight now.
Definitely. I mean, that is a big transition from a little balcony in London to having the Yorkshire Dales behind you. Was the reason for that move to do with obviously the exploration you can do there?
Yeah, so Peter, my other half, and I, in 2014, we quit our jobs. I was in publishing and he was a teacher. And we basically spent a year traveling around the world. And when we came back to London, it was just too much. I mean, as I said, I was born and raised there. My heart's always going to be in London. But the commute, the pollution, the noise, the lack of space, all of that just got to us. And so we wanted to be somewhere close to the outdoors. He did try to convince me to move up to Scotland, but that was just too far for me. So Yorkshire Dales was
too cold.
It was kind of a halfway point. So it's been really nice having, we can walk into the Dales if we want to. And so that's been amazing.
Yeah. And now you can park your car without stressing about it.
Exactly. Well, yeah. I didn't drive in London. I'm not crazy, but yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so the first part of the show is always looking into a bit of history with the author and trying to figure out, how you arrived out where you are now. And of course, Next of Kin is your latest works, but we want to kind of dig into the past and find out how you got to that point. So we're going to get into round one, and then we can find out about that story. So Kia, round one is the road to writing. Can we find out exactly how that journey started and, where the inspirations came from when you were perhaps a lot younger?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I always tell this story. It started with my mum, who is a great storyteller, actually. So when I was younger, about 4 or 5 years old, I basically wouldn't eat unless you told me a story. So every mealtime, it was mum tell me a story, and she was just one of those naturally gifted storytellers. And so that instilled a very early love for storytelling. And then I was always a reader. I come from quite a conservative family, and so in terms of leisure activities, there wasn't much. It was just me and my siblings at home. But every Saturday we were allowed to go to the library, and so that was kind of my conduit into a freer world. And so every week I would come home with 6 books, and that would be my leisure time.
Wow.
And so I think that instilled, again, an early love for storytelling. I wanted to write. I was writing all my little stories when I was younger, and one of my teachers, bless him, he used to bind the stories that I used to write. He used to bind them, with those black ring binders, so that they would look like actual books. And when I left primary school, I remember him giving me a notebook and pen and saying to me, when you're on public transport, listen to conversations and note them down in your notebook to write and use in your own stories. And that early vote of confidence was so amazing, and I carried that with me. And so when at 14 years old in England, we all do work experience, and so I said to my teachers, I want to be a writer. And so I spent 2 weeks at the Sunday Times magazine, which for a 14-year-old was incredible. But when it came to choosing my A levels, I think I put on my pragmatic hat and thought, well, look, I don't know anybody who's a writer. I don't know anybody who's a journalist. And so I chose to go down an academic path. I did computer science at university and then worked in tech for 3 years. And then I think it started with Asian Woman magazine, which was now sadly defunct, but back then it was the biggest magazine for the South Asian diaspora. And I wrote a column for them, and just seeing my name in print for the first time, I think I was 24, and I thought, my God, this is my first love. This is what I want to do. And so then I took a 50% pay cut to become a writer, and never looked back, really.
That is fascinating. The thing that jumps out to me instantly was when you're in school and you had the love for story at the time, but your teacher must have really seen the potential in you at that time and taken a step towards encouraging that, because a lot of people might have just put that to the side almost and thought, oh, you're great, she likes reading and writing, but perhaps there's nothing more than that than there is there. So it really is a big step for that teacher to encourage you in that way. And it was some great advice at the time as well. How much, was that an influence on the rest of your career then as a writer?
I think it was really key, actually, Chris, which is why I always tell people, if you see a spark of promise or ambition in a child, especially creatively, please encourage that. Don't discourage them. And it was definitely to credit to him, because, I come from a very working class part of England, Tower Hamlets, it's got one of the highest rates of child poverty. And so he could have very easily have said to me, well, this isn't going to work. You're going to either follow an academic path or end up in a manual job, as many of my peers were at that time. And so, again, credit to him. I think that early vote of confidence, just knowing that this adult believed in me, instilled that early love for storytelling, but also to work on my craft. And again, I think so much of it is linked to reading. I remember just running out of books in the class library, but he always encouraged me to read beyond what a normal 10 or 11-year-old would be reading. And so I think that's so important for adults to kind of encourage that and foster early signs of whether it be talent or ambition.
Yeah. Have you got a story that sticks in your mind out of all those stories? You mentioned 6 books a week is kind of a lot of books, even now for a reader. So is there something out of all of those books that sticks in your mind?
I mean, I used to love the Judy Blume books when I was younger, coming of age. The one I always go back to is Anne of Green Gables, because I think that was the first book that I kind of came across a feminist in fiction. Anne was this red-headed orphan girl in Canada, and I always say she was as far away from me as you could possibly get, but I related to her because I saw sparks of kind of what shall I say, rebellion in her.
Yeah.
So again, I'm one of 6 daughters. I'm one of 6, I've got 5 sisters, and I grew up in quite a traditional household where you were expected to be quite demure and not run around, certainly not be a tomboy. And then here was Anne Shirley, who was very much like me, a bit of a tomboy, didn't want to, be a neat little girl with her hair in braids and so on. And so I think that book was quite formative for me.
Yeah. In terms of your sisters, where did you kind of rank in the age group there?
So so I think there's an 18 age gap between the eldest and the youngest. I'm number 4, but there are 8 siblings in total. So I've got 2 brothers as well. So I'm number 6 in the pecking order, and then there's 2 younger than me. So it's a massive family. But I always say that's brilliant training ground for a novelist, because there's always high drama and conflict in a family that size.
I'm just trying to imagine a house, with that many siblings in, and you having the ability to sit and concentrate on a story and actually get lost in that story and not be constantly distracted. I mean, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it was always really noisy. But funnily enough, I'm the total opposite now. I need complete silence in order to write. And maybe that's just me rebelling against where I came from. But yeah, you get used to it, I think.
Yeah. Anya says Anne of Green Gables was awesome. Agreed. There's a couple of people agreeing with that. Yeah. Okay, so then you get to your work experience time, which must have been quite an eye opener. Especially as a 14-year-old stepping into that world. But then you mentioned your name appearing on a print, and this was very exciting. What was the next step for you, and how did that lead towards an author career?
Sure. So after that column, I kind of emailed the editor and said, are there any full-time positions? And she said, we have a position as a features writer. And this was really gutting for me, because this is all I ever wanted. But I was working in tech, and I had a 3-month notice period. And she said, we can't wait that long. And so that was really heartbreaking for me, because this is all I ever wanted, to be a professional writer. And here it was being offered to me, but I couldn't leave my job because of the 3-month waiting period. So then eventually, I let that opportunity slip by. But what I then did was hand my notice in, hoping that in that 3-month period, another role would come up. And then indeed, luckily it did, at the same magazine. And so 3 months later, I packed my box up. As I said, took my 50% pay cut, which was hard, but we sacrificed for our passions. And then I took a role at Asian Woman magazine, worked there for a year, and that was brilliant training ground, because Chris, I don't have an official journalism qualification. And I remember turning up and having to ask, what a tear sheet was, what a flat plan was, what a DPS was. And I remember somebody looking at me going, it's a double-page spread. But I wasn't embarrassed. You ask questions and you learn, and that was really brilliant training ground for me. And I ended up interviewing people like Riz Ahmed and Jay Sean and Ishka Shankar, and all these great luminaries in the British Asian diaspora, and I never looked back, really. And then I was freelancing for a few years. And then trying to get published. For me, the most difficult part of that journey was getting an agent. And we can talk a bit more about that if you want to. But after I got an agent, then the rest of it kind of happened relatively quickly.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of touching on an agent there, what advice would you give someone who's starting that journey and, who has never even looked into it and they want to look for an agent? What advice would you give there?
I would say, early on, I read some advice that said, if you don't hear back from 12 agents, then think about reworking the book. But I don't really think that's great advice, because 12 is such a small sample and taste is so variable. I would say work in 12 batches, and then take on the feedback. But I think the best piece of advice I read was, don't stop until you get to 80 agents. And I queried, probably quite close to that. And then one agent took it on, and then I got a two book deal with HarperCollins. And so I would say persevere, but also take that feedback on board and tweak your query, because sometimes it's not the manuscript, sometimes it's the query that you're not getting right, or the titles that you're comparing your book to. So just persevere. I think that's the main thing.
It's fantastic advice. It's definitely something that has been said before, that you must believe in what you're doing and keep being persistent. But also that feedback, which you mentioned, is crucial. If you're getting feedback, it's not the time to be kind of annoyed at that feedback. That is feedback for you to grow and develop. So I think that's a very important thing that you mentioned, is to grow from that feedback and not dismiss it.
Yeah, and I think the other important thing is, just remember when you see all these amazing announcements on Twitter or on social media, that those people were in your position at one point, and it does only take one yes. I remember feeling quite demoralized, halfway through the process. And then after I got that one yes, it happened very quickly. And it's very easy for me to look back now and say, oh, I've got, 3 courtroom dramas behind my belt, under my belt, not behind my belt, under my belt, and it's so easy to project success, but you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And so persevere. Try not to compare yourself. That saying, comparison is the thief of joy. It really is true. And just keep working on your craft.
Definitely. So all the stories that you wrote as a young person, as a young child, are they anywhere? Are they saved? Are you going to look at those one day and maybe build something from them?
No, there is a really terrible collection of poetry somewhere,
Okay.
but that's never going to see the light of day. But no, sadly, all those, I'm very unsentimental, and so I didn't save any of that. But it is nice when I left school, you have those leaving books that everybody writes in. So many of my friends were saying, I love your writing, I love your stories, can't wait to see what you do. And I look back at that and think, it's so nice that people recognize that spark so early on. And so that, that's always given me succor. And I feel really happy about that.
That's fantastic. Excellent advice. So at the point when you had submitted and you finally got an agent, and that deal became apparent that you were assigned, how did you feel and react to that? Was there a sense of kind of a bit of dread, or was there excitement? How did you manage that?
Oh no, it's excitement through and through, because I've been waiting for it for such a bloody long time.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, I was in Australia, so as part of Atlas and Boots, as I said, we travel quite a lot, and we were camping in the outback, and then the next day we packed up. We were in this sweltering hot van because the air conditioning had broken down, and I remember just getting a little spot of mobile phone reception and the email from my agent, and sometimes only the subject line and the first paragraph loads, and so it said something like, exciting news, I'm really happy to tell you. And then the rest of it didn't load. So I'm sitting there stewing in about 40-degree heat.
Tell me what?
What's this exciting news? And then finally, I got a little bit more reception. And then she said, we've been offered a 2-book deal with HarperCollins. And
wow.
It was one of those tours where there's about 12 of you in the van. And me being British, I didn't want to scream. But inside, I was just like, oh my God. So yeah, it was really, really exciting.
They must have looked around and thought, what's wrong with you? And you're like, oh.
Somebody did tap me on the shoulder and say, oh, what's happening? And I said, oh, I've got some good news. And she said, oh, I could tell that you're really excited. So yeah, that was amazing. And then, as I said, after that, it all happened really quickly.
So as someone who's just been signed and got their deal, maybe advice to someone who may be in a similar situation moving forward, when they say you've got a 2-book deal, do you think, oh, I wasn't expecting a 2-book deal? And if you did think that, how did you manage to kind of think about that and adapt to it?
Sure. I think I was expecting a 2-book deal just because that's often the way with fiction. I didn't really worry too much just because I had wanted it for such a long time that I wasn't going to let anything kind of mar it. After Take It Back went through the editing process, I then was a little bit worried because I'd never written to a contract before. I'd never written, with a waiting audience before. And so writing Truth Be Told, the 2nd book, was quite a different experience. But at that stage, I knew that I had the support system. My editor's brilliant, my agent's brilliant. And I just knew that if I were going wrong, they would tell me. And so and it's one of these things where I've always been such a big reader, and that's why I was confident that I've got the pedigree to be a writer. I've mentioned I don't have a formal qualification. I always say, the only qualification you really need to be a great writer is to read a lot. And so because I had been writing for such a long time and reading, I just felt confident in my ability. That said, it doesn't get easier. I'm writing book 4 now, the follow-up to, the kind of the next one after Next of Kin. And there are days where I'm like, I don't know how to write a novel. But yeah, I think I was just excited. I didn't let anything get in the way of that.
So how is your writing style? Has it changed since you started? And is it more, I kind of think you might be a bit of a planner.
I am, yes. So I'm definitely a planner. It has changed a little bit in that with Take It Back, I had the space and the time to be perfecting as I went along. And so the actual writing of it took a long time, a few years actually, on and off. Whereas truth be told, I wrote in about 9 months, 8 months. And I think now I just brute force my way to the end to make sure I've got enough story, I know what's happening, and then I will go back and edit. But I'm very much a planner. I know you're not. I know you're a bit of a pantser, and I get that because sometimes it does feel like, you know, you're filling in the blanks, and so you know exactly what's going to happen. It's almost like homework. Right, this is what this scene is going to be, and so now I just have to write it. You can plan too much, and so I try to let the story breathe, and then sometimes you'll think, oh, this character's not working, so I have to take them out. But yeah, from chapter to chapter and almost scene to scene, I pretty much know what's happening.
Fantastic. Kia's done her homework. She knows I'm a pantster. Right. What we're going to do before we move on to round 2, I just want to touch on the Atlas and the Boots website for a start, because it is fantastic, and some of the images in there are mind-blowing. And it does say on there as well that it is the best outdoors and travel blog of 2021, which is a fantastic achievement. But it is incredible. Are all those pictures yours?
Most of them, but I can't take credit. That's my other half, so he's a photographer. So most of the excellent travel photography there it belongs to him, and all the stuff that you'll see on our Instagram, Atlas and Boots, is his. Do
you mind if I show it, the website?
No, of course not. No. Please do.
So this is Atlas and Boots. Is a travel blog that says there over 250,000 people a month read this blog, and some of these images look absolutely incredible, like they're made up. No offense to that. I mean, they're just so good that they look like they're manufactured. But what I love about this is there's advice about all the different aspects of how to do it, what to wear, the places in Britain, places abroad. So it really is a fantastic website full of information and stories. I will be touching into that and delving into that information when I start looking into this 100K tracker that I have next year. Which is going to be absolutely crazy. So I will be using that website, and I will leave a link to that in the description for you to have a look at as well. Okay, so I'm not sure what that's in reference to. Ooh, with big capitals. Okay, so part 2 is What's the Story. We will find out about Next of Kin and kind of what's leading up. You mentioned that you're writing something for the next part. We'll find out about that as well, what you can tell us anyway, in part 2. So part 2 is What's the Story? And Kia, what is the story?
Right. So in Next of Kin, it's another courtroom drama. This time there is a London architect called Leila Syed who receives a panicked phone call from her brother-in-law one morning. His son's nursery have called to ask where little Max is. Leila was supposed to drop him off at nursery that morning, but she forgot that he was in her car. So she races to the car park and then realizes the horror of what she has done. And what follows is an explosive criminal trial that pits one sister against the other. And through that framing, explores the themes of motherhood, childlessness, and the ways in which we treat women based on whether or not they have children. And like my other novels, Take It Back and Truth Be Told, you know, they can be just read as pure page turners or thrillers, but they do also ask the reader to engage in some broader issues. And so, as I said, you know, in this one, it's the way society treats women based on whether or not they have children.
There's some things that spring to mind when you mentioned that. A, do you purposely put these issues in there? And B, how do readers react to when those issues arise?
I do, because I think genre fiction is actually a really great way to engage with kind of social commentary, but in a very light touch way. You know, nobody likes to be lectured to. And so there's this feeling that great fiction is really literary fiction, but I disagree with that. I've read so much genre fiction that's just beautifully written. Chris Whitaker's We Begin at the End has just gone stratospheric, and everybody always talks about how beautiful the writing is. And so I just think that especially courtroom dramas and legal thrillers, they're such a great way to engage with contemporary issues, because the people who end up in courtrooms are often the most vulnerable in society. B, it's an adversarial system, so it's naturally ripe for high drama and conflict. And C, the stakes are naturally high because somebody stands to lose their liberty and sometimes their life. And so for me, that's always been really attractive. And also, look, without getting into identity politics, I'm a woman, I'm Asian, I come from a Muslim working class background. And so I've seen so many issues and experienced these issues in my life that I almost feel it would be remiss not to tap into all of that in my fiction. But I definitely don't want to kind of, bash the reader over the head with ethical fiction. I mean, that just sounds awful, doesn't it? Ethical fiction. And so for me, the most important thing as a novelist is to write an entertaining story, because if you're not doing that, then you failed as a novelist. But I think the kind of grappling with things like race in Take It Back, or homophobia and the stigma around male rape in Truth Be Told, and now with Next of Kin, these issues just add an extra layer for me. And again, the reader can choose to engage with them, or they can just take it at face value as a page turner.
It really does. Anya says as well that it sounds like you've got a great balance in there, which does sound like that you've balanced the issues along with the drama and the excitement. So is there a tip that you perhaps have for finding that balance as an author?
I think, again, making sure you know what you're doing with your plot. So, some people say they don't, as you say, they don't plan, and the twists kind of reveal themselves throughout the novel, which is great. For me, I like to build in clues, not too obviously, but just season it with a little bit of, this is what's going to happen. And so often with my novels, there's a central question. So with Take It Back, it was 4 Muslim boys are accused of raping a disabled white girl. Did they do it? Did it go down the way she said it did? In Next of Kin, it's did Leila Syed intentionally leave her nephew in her car while she went to deal with an emergency at work? And so that often propels the reader on. But in terms of feedback, people love the courtroom drama aspect. They say to me, I feel like I'm on the jury, I'm flip-flopping, I don't know who's guilty. And so they really engage with that aspect.
Yeah. I love what you said about sprinkling a bit in there, just, spreading it out throughout. And I think even as a pantster, if I was writing a sensitive subject, I would most certainly put more research into that than I would kind of as a normal fiction work there, where it just kind of expands itself. So I think, definitely a bit of research needs to go in there as well, as if you're working on a sensitive issue.
Yeah, and the thing with research, what I always say, because I write legal thrillers, but I'm not a lawyer, and so I've had to do so much research. I've spent weeks in court. I've got 3 barristers that consult on my novels. But the thing with research, I think, is, to do 100%, but then pull it back to about 70% for the sake of the story. And so some people like to show off the kind of technical research that they've done, but that's because you're trying to make yourself feel better, not the reader. And so you always have to keep the reader in mind. Is this important? Is this technical detail going to bog down the story, or is it actually going to propel it forward?
Fantastic. Ian Hamilton on the chat, hello to you. He says, can't wait to get Next of Kin. Heard a lot of great things. And indeed, there are a lot of great reviews online. One of them that I picked out earlier, it says, this book should be made into a film. It hooked me straight in and then took me on a roller coaster ride, twisting and turning and leaving me gasping. That is an incredible review. In fact, that is just a snippet of the review because it is this big. And a lot of them are, which shows a real passion for what you're writing there. My question on this review would be, how do you try to make something, and you mentioned drama and action and high stakes, with that in mind, how do you make a roller coaster ride that twists and turns, leaving someone gasping? Someone who wants to write these kind of stories, what advice would you give them in kind of plot and story for that?
For me, I kind of I literally have a chart, you know, and then it kind of goes like this, and then you like my sound effects.
I do, yeah. Simple. I'm very simple.
So, you know, it kind of needs 3 peaks throughout the story, and each of these need to make things a bit more intense. And so, you know, you have the kind of ignition point. And one book I really recommend actually is The Science of Storytelling by Will Storr. And he takes a very character-driven approach to plotting and developing your story. And I found that really useful because you kind of can plan out the beats of the story, but make sure that it's continuing to dial up the tension. And so I will have kind of 3 beats in the middle of the story where the tension is continuing, and then obviously a big climax at the end. And so look, I'm not an expert on plotting, but as I said, I think if you read a lot of crime fiction or read a lot in your genre and outside it, I think you naturally get a feel of what works in that genre.
Looking back at all the books you read when you were younger and what you write now, do you ever feel like there could be a change in genre direction?
Oh, that's a good question. I've always loved crime, and I think the things that attract me and interest me, as I said before, the contemporary issues, and I think crime is just such a natural fit for that. Often also, you know, the flip side is when you do start to get a bit of a profile as an author, it's very hard to switch genres unless you do it under a pseudonym. But I love crime, you know, I love darkness, and so I think this is a natural fit for me. I'm not sure I could suddenly write romance or sci-fi or anything like that, and so I see this as my natural home. One thing I did consider, because when Take It Back came out, I kind of wrote it as a little bit of a, you know, Apple Tree Yard or an Anatomy of a Scandal. So I didn't see myself writing legal thrillers long term. But of course, because it did well, the publisher wanted more of the same. And at that stage, I thought, well, do I want to actually write more kind of domestic suspense or psychological thriller? Do I want to carry on in this vein? But as I said, I think the courtroom is so interesting to me, again, because so many of the most vulnerable in society end up in the courtroom. And so for now, I think I'll stick to this genre.
Great stuff. Do you feel that the crime genre itself is kind of bigger than, I kind of personally think that it might be bigger than a lot of other the genres out there, especially when you look at the podcasting world. There are so many dedicated true crime or crime podcasts out there. It's kind of incredible. What do you think the connection or the interest that is there for people to get into that?
I mean, I definitely think, I know crime sells quite a bit more than lots of other genres. I think we just attracted to it because it's a safe way to deal with some of the worst things that can happen. And so women are some of the, I think, the biggest fans of crime fiction. And so that can feel a bit counterintuitive because of the way women are treated in society, you know, women to be demure and, you know, and ladylike, but actually we like all this murder and intrigue. But I think it's just a safe way to interact with things that we are actually quite scared of happening. But this is a very safe environment in which to grapple with that and process that. And so, yeah, I mean, look, I'm not a psychologist, but yeah, I think we are just naturally drawn to fiction because it is safe.
Fantastic. Okay, before we move on to the final round where we get questions from the community, guys, if you do have any for Kia, for myself, for both of us, or about crime, about darkness, or whatever you may be, start posting those in the chat now and we will get into those. But before we do that, I have a few staple questions to ask Kia, and then we will find out who the family member is that we can welcome on Twitter. But let's start with the questions from the show. Okay, I've thrown some random ones in there, especially being someone who's a travel writer. You might have one or two of these. Do you have a biggest fear or phobia?
Oh, it's really boring. I'm scared of spiders and cockroaches.
Is that boring?
Well, it's very common, isn't it? I mean, cockroaches just freak me out. I mean, and I've got a story about this actually. So we were in Sri Lanka between 2 national parks, and we just chose a place in between and thought, okay, well, we'll just stay there for the night. You know, it was quite grubby, but fine. It's just for one night. And then we went out to eat, and when we came back to our room, I mean, I'm not even joking, Chris, it was crawling. It was crawling. And so I'm scared of creepy crawlies. I asked the guy, do you have another room? And he said no. I think what had happened was behind was a field, and I think they had laid down some fertilizer or something that just drew all the insects to the first building they could find. And then the guy gave me some Raid, and so we basically sprayed it all over all the cracks and everything, put towels in there. There were flying cockroaches and so on.
Wow.
Luckily, we had a mosquito net, so we set that up. That's
literally wrapped yourself in the mosquito
I did.
net.
I mean, you joke, but I was in the mosquito net. And then the next morning when we woke up, when we took the towel out, there was just a carpet. There was just a carpet of these creepy crawlies. And then there was a guy who said at breakfast the next morning, he said he woke up at 3 a.m. and he said, my duvet was just covered. And we were lucky because, as I said, we'd got the spray and we taking care of all the cracks. But this guy said it was like a flying zoo. And I think that was probably my worst travel experience. So yeah, spiders and mainly cockroaches.
Well, initially I thought, okay, cockroaches, not too bad, but in that scenario, I completely changed my perspective.
Not
that
when they're
sounds
flying. I mean,
horrendous.
No.
Fantastic. But spiders, I mean, in the UK, not too terrible.
Not too terrible. Funnily enough, I've done hypnosis at London Zoo. They run a course where you can go in and handle spiders. Okay. And after that, I think it worked, but I don't know if it's a placebo thing where you think it's worked and that's why it's worked. So
interesting.
I can deal with spiders.
Okay, so here's the question then. I'm a celebrity, get me out of here, gives you a ring and says, look, we'll give you a load of cash. In fact, we'll give you a film or whatever. They give you loads of prizes. Would you do it?
No, you couldn't pay me £1 million.
No, not even for £1 million.
No.
Oh, wow.
No.
Okay. That I come on then. Any other travel stories that are amazing? There's got to be a few in there.
I mean, horror stories. I mean, that was probably my biggest horror story. In terms of kind of amazing destinations, people always ask me, what's your number one travel experience? And I would say it's this volcano on Tanna Island, which is part of Vanuatu, which is off the coast of Australia. I say off the coast, I think it's 5 hours away or something. But it was just, it's an active volcano, and you go up there and you can watch the lava spray. And that was just incredible. And so I think that was my number one travel experience. It is very far. I think we traveled about 36 hours to get to Vanuatu. Wow. But if you are in that area of the world, if you're in New Zealand or Australia, I would recommend trying to get to Vanuatu.
Fantastic. Favorite place in the UK?
Oh, that's a good question. I'd have to say the Yorkshire Dales, where I am now. Malham Cove is probably one of the prettiest viewpoints in England. So yeah, Yorkshire Dales.
Check that one out. Definitely sounds great. I'm just itching now. You started making me itch. Okay. What is the one person you would most, or you would most like to interview?
Oh God, that's such a good question.
They could, I'll tell you what, open it to dead or alive.
Dead or alive? I mean, this is a controversial choice now, but I mean, when I was younger, I was always a massive fan of Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
So he'd probably be my dead choice. Alive, if I can say that. Alive, I'd love to meet Van Morrison, but I do hear that he's a very tetchy interviewee, and so I don't know if I'd be able to get anything out of him, but I think he's a genius, and so I'd love to meet him.
I mean, Michael Jackson, I think, is dead, so I think that is classed. You're okay to class him as one of those guests. But yeah, I think that would be a fascinating interview. Both of, in fact, great answers. Okay. If you could take a character from anything in fiction, whether that be TV, film, or literature, and A, put them into any story of yours or create a story for them, what would you do? And B, if you could bring them into real life, what would you do with them?
Oh, that's such a good question. I mean, I write dark fiction, so one of my favorite characters from TV is Dexter Morgan from Dexter. So I don't know if you've ever seen it, but I highly recommend it. He's so interesting because he's a serial killer, so obviously he's terrible, but then he only kills people who kill, and so he's a vigilante with a bit of a moral heart. And so I think I'd love to do something with his character. In terms of what I would do in real life, probably just go and have drinks in Miami and
Okay.
just not kill anyone for that night, but just say, Dexter, come hang with me,
Yeah, Dexter, please don't kill me. Fancy a
Please
drink.
don't kill me. Because he's really funny. I mean, the show is very funny. It's just got this very dark humor, but then he's also, ostensibly he's quite nerdy, but then he's also got this dark, almost quite sexy aspect to him as well. And so, yeah, I think he'd be an interesting character to hang out with.
Fantastic. I think that's a great answer. I would be a little concerned that he might be I've had a few drinks now. I want to slow down a bit just in case. Okay, if you could change the ending to anything at all, for good reasons or bad, TV, film, literature, what ending would you change and why?
Oh, this could be controversial. I would, well, funnily enough, you mentioned My Sister's Keeper earlier. I would probably change the ending of the movie to match the ending of the book, because I just thought the movie kind of whitewashed the ending. And so, I mean, I won't spoil anything, but I think the book was a bit of a shock ending, whereas the movie was a little bit more predictable. And so I would change that. I'm not sure how Jodie Picoult felt about it, actually, if she was happy with that change or not, but they gave it a Hollywood ending, and I would undo that.
If you had a option, if your book Next of Kin was optioned, would you have any characters or actors in mind to play your character?
God, I haven't even thought about Next of Kin. I always get asked this about Take It Back. And I always say, with Zara Khalil, the main protagonist, I always say I have two actresses in mind, actually. So one is Archie Punjabi, who played Kalinda in The Good Wife, which is one of the best shows that has ever been aired. So if you don't watch The Good Wife, go and watch The Good Wife. And the second is Amber Rose Reva, who played Dina Madani in The Punisher on Netflix. Okay. And she was really brilliant. I know those two characters are quite similar to Zara in that, they're really kick-ass, but they're also flawed, they have a vulnerability as well. If Next of Kin got sold, I'd probably just borrow the same actresses and be like, Leila instead.
Can we have the same, please? Fantastic. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to find out who the new... Oh, I missed a question, and then we'll find out the community member. Okay. Looking back on your career, say down the line now, what would literary success look like for you? What would be kind of, okay, I'm happy now?
That's a good question. Frankly, honestly, I would love to hit the Sunday Times bestseller list, but I do try to take a bit of a philosophical view of success, because there's that quote, when you get there, there's no there. When I was younger, I wanted to write for the New York Times, the Guardian, the BBC. And once I've done that, then it's, I also want to write for the Financial Times or the Times. And now I've done that. And now it's, I'd love to be in the New Yorker, or it might be, I want to get a book deal. And then the next thing is, I want to get a book deal with a Big Five publisher. And then the next thing is, I want to get a book deal with a Big Five publisher with a big advance. And so I don't think it ever stops. So I do try to bear in mind, look, for me, success, I should also look at it in relative terms, because if I look at where I came from, Tower Hamlets, my parents didn't read, write, or speak English. I was very working class, to where I am now. I try to tell myself, look, you are already a success. Yeah. But often, as I said, the goalposts move and you're always after the next thing. And so I think if I hit the Sunday Times bestseller list, which is kind of the gold standard of bestseller lists, I would feel like a success. But also, the other aspect, without sounding too sentimental, is just to inspire other Bangladeshi girls to get into writing as well. When I was younger, I couldn't name one, and now there are a few of us, and so just to inspire the next generation of writers as well. That sounds really trite, but yeah, that to me would be literary success.
It makes sense, and it's a great answer. I mean, is there a shortage of writers in that area?
Yeah, and certainly from a working class background, and that doesn't just apply to Bangladeshi, women. It's across the board. When we talk about diversity, I always say, look, class matters as well, because for me, I've mentioned this triple lock, I'm Asian, I'm working class, I'm a woman, but I really feel that class was the thing that held me back most. And so I think we shouldn't discount that when we are talking about things like race and gender and so on.
Fantastic. Okay, so what we'll do now is what we do in every show is introduce someone who's followed us on Twitter, who may not have many followers. And obviously this is a community that loves to grow and bring people into the family. So on Twitter, someone, when they follow the show who hasn't got many followers, we like to shout them out and send them a GIF. Are you aware of what a GIF is?
Am I aware of what a
Yes.
GIF? Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Often people get it confused. So the animated social media thing, I will read out the person's name shortly after playing a very short video. And I want you to think of a GIF that we can send them. It could be any theme at all. And there's been some really random ones out there already. Dry shampoo. We've had Marilyn Monroe's popped up a few times. Aliens. We've had a lot of things up there. So if you could think of one, and it could be anything at all, I will play this little video, and then we will get on the new family member or the details. And hopefully the people watching and listening back to this can welcome them to the family on Twitter. So after that fascinating video, our first, there's only one tonight, but our person that is followed the show and needs a bit of support is Anne Loyal. Her Twitter handle is @Ann, ANN, Loyal, LOYAL, author. I write whatever I feel like writing. Well done to you. A lot of people don't feel they can do that, so well done. And she only has 9 followers, so she's brand new to Twitter. Let's give her a big WCCS warm welcome. Say welcome to the family, all that business. Kia, what GIF or type of GIF are we sending them?
One of my favorite GIFs is James Franco winking, and so I think that would be a good GIF to send her if you can find it.
I'll have a little look for that right now, because in fact, I'm sure James Franco, if I'm thinking of the right person here, is the one that I saw.
127 hours. He's the actor.
Is it a CO at the end? Yes, it is him. So he's got two of my favorite GIFs are James Franco. And that is the one, do you know where he stands up and he's got a scarf on and he does a weird up and down look?
No.
That is a great one.
I'm going to look it up.
And there's one he does a heart thing. So if there's any heart things, it's not too cheesy. He's a black and white James Franco holding a heart.
Okay.
So I will use the James Franco weird standing one up for that. And I'll send that one out from the show. Great one. Guys, if you have any questions for Kia or myself, please send them in right now, and I will read them out after this short video for part 3 of the show. So thank you for anyone who may have sent a question in already. And please bring them in. Keep sending them in. Bring them in. I'm losing my mind tonight. Anya has got a question, and she says, if you had to hold a cockroach or a spider in your hand for 1 whole minute, which would it be?
It would definitely be a spider, because I've already done that. I mentioned I went to that hypnosis session at London Zoo, and then you end up holding a tarantula. But funnily enough, I'm not actually that scared of tarantulas, because they don't feel like real spiders, if you know what I mean. They're almost like a small creature as opposed to a spider. So I've actually held a spider before, and so I would definitely do that. I would never hold a cockroach, no. No.
But then it depends where you are in the world, because spiders in Britain tend to be the little tiny ones or all right ones. And then if you're in Australia, for example, you've got I don't even know what they're called, massive, humongous spiders that are dangerous.
Yeah, I would still choose the spider. I mean, cockroaches just terrify me.
Yeah, there's a lot of response to that question. Leila says, Anya, I'd choose neither. I already write about a spider taller than 3 stories. I don't want to hold one. Yeah, pardon my misspelled word there. That confused me a little. Anya says, I'll probably go a spider because I hate cockroaches too. So not a lot of love for a spider there. No. Cockroach, sorry. I think I don't think I've ever met a cockroach. Is that the thing to say there?
What?
I don't think I've ever seen one. So I think I'd hold that thing.
Right, okay. Well, that's something to look forward to.
Yeah, one day. If I find one, I'll put it on the show.
I know a hotel in Sri Lanka that you can go and meet one.
I'm not entirely sure that would be appropriate for me, although it'd make great television. So Ian Hamilton, thank you for your question. Did Kia watch Emma, I can't pronounce the name, Raducanu on Saturday?
Raducanu. I did.
Wasn't it great?
I did.
Random one as well. She's an F1 fan. Max Verstappen is reckless.
Well, he did get, the stewards voted against him. So yeah, he is reckless.
It was, I am a fan of neither. It was 50-50 in that corner. I couldn't tell you. But also, Emma, I watched that on was it Saturday evening? Absolutely fantastic. And to be 18 years old and to hold that kind of composure and, what's the word? Gratitude and awareness, and just be so amazing as a human being in that scenario, I think is speaks volumes.
She's incredible. She's a star, and I mean, look, I live tweeted, while I was watching, and I'm not particularly a massive tennis fan. I say I'm a fair weather fan, but it was such an extraordinary match, and she's such an extraordinary young woman, and so I'm really looking forward to to seeing her in the future and her career grow. And
the fact we got a great British tennis star,
exactly.
Another one to look forward to, because let's be honest, I think Andy Murray's perhaps on his way out the door. And Tim Henman was always a bit of a letdown, wasn't he? And in terms of F1, I'm not entirely sure whose fault that was. But all I can say was Lewis Hamilton is very lucky he had that halo around his head. Otherwise, he would have had a tyre. Yeah. He would have been in a lot of trouble. Okay, another question here. Let's have a look. From Halo Scott, did the sibling dynamics in a large family influence your character dynamics? Which is a great question.
Yes, they did actually. And so in Take It Back and Truth Be Told, Zara Khalil has 2 sisters. Obviously, I've got 5. I didn't want to load down the book with that many, but I definitely borrowed elements of my sisters for those characters. And so her elder sister, Salma, is very responsible, takes care of her, and her younger sister is a little bit more fiery and defensive and a bit more of a feminist. And so I certainly borrowed qualities of my sisters. And in terms of the dynamic in Next of Kin, there is a little bit of sibling rivalry between the 2 sisters. And I've seen and experienced that not only in my life, but in other sibling pairs. I think that's very natural. The Next of Kin kind of opens with women are taught to compete. And so it's very natural that your sister would be your earliest competitor. And so I think that is loosely based on some of my experiences as well. When you're growing up, there is a pecking order. My sister's all very beautiful, for example. And so which one of you is the most beautiful, and so there's always that little bit of competition. And so yeah, it did feed into my 3 novels to some extent.
A lot of real life does, and life experience plays a big part in writing novels. Is there anything from your travel vlogging experiences that perhaps have made it into your works? I
think as sometimes you might see an interesting, the way the sun drops through a glass. I remember drops through trees, and it might look like dropped glass, and then you might think, oh, that's a really good metaphor. And so there are things that you see. It might be on a mountaintop while looking at the volcano. It might be cockroaches flying over your head. And so there are metaphors that reveal themselves to you that I've definitely used in my work. And so for me, being out in the world is such an important part of writing fiction. And whether that's describing places or people, sometimes you might hear a distinctive laugh or see an interesting feature in a person's face, and I will definitely think to myself, oh, I'll be having that. And so yeah, it's definitely helped with my fiction.
Wow, that is amazing. And I'm so untraveled that all of this sounds like crazy adventure to me, like cockroaches flying around on a volcano. Oh wow, it's definitely a life of adventure, and I'm surprised you haven't written a lot of adventure stories off the back of that. And maybe they'll come out one day. Maybe if I do shift genre, you never know. A little question before we do wrap up. That amazing typewriter to your left hand side there, does it work?
It does work, yeah. And I think Stephen King has the same one, because he was on the cover of a magazine with one. So I felt, oh, I've got the same typewriter as Stephen King. But yeah, Peter, my partner, bought that for me in our early years of dating, actually.
Oh wow, that's a great gift. And have you ever used it?
Just to test it. So I've not used it in anger. I think
if I was to type on there, I'd make so many mistakes. It wouldn't work.
No.
Okay, there's one more question before we wrap up, and again, it's from Ian. He says, out of the two, who does Kia like more to read, Ian Rankin or Val McDermid?
That's controversial because I'm at bloody Scotland this weekend, and so both of them will be there. Look,
They probably won't watch this. I might tag Ian Rankin in. Ian Rankin's been on the show, so I might tag him and say, look, you know.
Kia said both of them. Both of them.
But the thing is, you can watch both of them in the band this weekend.
Well, Ian Rankin's not in the band, is he?
No. He is.
No.
He is.
In the Fun-Loving Crime Writers.
Ian Rankin is in the Fun-Loving Crime Writers. I'm certain of this.
No.
We talked about it on the show.
What?
I'm googling this right now because you're making me feel like I'm stupid. Fun-Loving Crime Writers. Okay, let's have a look at this. About Fun-Loving Crime Writers. Let's see if it's got the band. Mark Billingham. Oh my goodness, I might have made a mistake here. Who was on the show talking about it recently? Val McDermid, Chris Brookmeyer, Luca Vesti. I apologize for my outburst. Okay, you were right.
I don't like saying I told you so, but I did tell you so.
You did. Halo says cockroaches and termites can both die a fiery death. And ladybugs. What's wrong with ladybugs?
No, not ladybugs.
Although one did bite me before and I bled. Not many people believe that. It's true. Okay, before we do finish this up, Kia, where can people find your work? Where's your website and all of that good stuff?
So my website is kiaabdullah.com. Kia like the car, sadly. Abdullah like the King of Jordan. So kiaabdullah.com. I'm Kia Abdullah on Twitter and Instagram. Facebook, I'm less often. So I think those 3 channels are the best places to find me.
Fantastic. And again, we will leave the links to that in the description of the show, the podcast and the YouTube channel. Please support everything on the show and the people on the show. It's always good to do that. And again, if you're interested in any of those big news stories we had at the start of the show, there are tweets flying around all over Twitter tonight from the Queer Indie website, the page and myself and the show. Please check them out. And I will see you on Friday. I have a guest on Friday, and I need to try and pronounce this person's name because I always mess these up. I have Soman Chiani. I think I said that right. He's the author of the incredible series, The School of Good and Evil, which was a huge series. And it's been made into a Netflix movie right now with Lawrence Fishburne and Charlie Theron at the moment, and it's out next year. And he's releasing his first book after that series. So it's going to be a very interesting time for him. But if you haven't seen that website of The School of Good and Evil, check it out, because as an author, that is something to achieve and aim for. It is incredible. So on Friday, please join me there. And in the meantime, please support the show, the podcast, and Kia. And we will see you on Friday. And in between now and then, please stay safe. Bye from me.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you, everyone, for joining. It's been so much fun.
See you soon. Bye.
Yeah.